Well, we're continuing our series today, the Come and See series, where we come along and see Jesus. And we see Jesus particularly through some of the events that are described in the Gospel of John. And today we get to look at a great passage, one of the great passages. A passage where Jesus confronts the death of one of his close friends. We see Jesus how Jesus deals with death. Most worldviews have a view on death and what death is all about. I mean, the modern scientific worldview would say there's nothing after death. You die, you disappear, your body decays, that's the end. It's not really science. You can't actually, there's no evidence for it, but it's just an assumption based on materialism. Buddhism and Hinduism talk about an endless cycle of dying and then being reborn and then dying and being reborn, and around it goes until, according to Buddhists, eventually you achieve nirvana and you kind of lose your individual existence in the universal oneness. The spiritual but not religious just talk about a better place. You go to a better place. No evidence for it, but it's a nice sounding idea. Well, the real question is, what does Jesus have to say about death? And we'll look at that today. If you want to open up to John chapter 11, we're going to work through this amazing passage. So John chapter 11, verse 1. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sister sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." Mary, Martha and Lazarus were very close friends of Jesus. He often dined at their place. We saw earlier in the gospel how Jesus eating at their place and Martha running around doing all the work and Mary just sitting at his feet. And not long after this event, we'll see Jesus again eating at their place and Mary pouring perfume on his feet to anoint him for burial. So he's a close friend. So when Lazarus became sick and was looking like dying, they naturally sent word to Jesus. And obviously the expectation was that Jesus, as their close friend, as their good friend, will come and he'll heal Lazarus. That's the obvious expectation. Mary and Martha and Lazarus were in Bethany, a place called Bethany. This is a picture of Bethany looking from the Mount of Olives. Now, as you know, Mount of Olives is just outside of Jerusalem. So Bethany is within, you can see Bethany from Jerusalem. It's less than 2k away. And if we go to the map, you see that, again, we've got the Sea of Galilee up in the north. We've got the Dead Sea down south, and joining them is the Jordan River. Then over on the west side of the Jordan River, you have Jerusalem. The west side of the Dead Sea, you've got Jerusalem, and right next to it is Bethany. And you see just over the west side, a place called Bethabara. That's where Jesus is ministering currently. Jesus has just been in Judea on the west side, and they tried to stone him. They tried to put him to death. So he's gone back out over to the west side, and he's ministering around there. It's probably about 25, 30k from Bethany. Verse 4, when he heard this, Jesus said, "The sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 days. That's strange, isn't it? Jesus loved them, so he didn't go. See, Jesus knew that something better was going to happen here. He knew the sickness wouldn't end in death. He knew that God was going to be glorified. He had something better in store for Mary and Martha and Lazarus than just going and healing. Verse 7, then he said to his disciples, "Let's go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back." Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It's when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light." So Jesus says, let's go back to Bethany. And the disciples say, we can't. They were just trying to stone you over there. That's why we left that region. And Jesus answers with this kind of metaphor. He says, look, it's 12 hours of daylight. If you walk by daylight, you won't stumble. Now, as a chiropractor, we understand this really well because there's this strange group of people that we treat called runners. And runners have this strange idea that you need to get up before dawn and go out and run 20k. And so often they're running in the dark, they hit a pothole which they don't see, and they fall over. And so we chiropractors are frequently saying, they're not 12 hours of daylight. Could you not run in the daylight? And Jesus says, it's the same in the spiritual realm. If you walk according to the light, you'll be okay. God will take care of you if you walk according to the light. And Jesus has been shown by God that he's going to do. He wants him to go and do something with Lazarus. He wants him to heal Lazarus. So Jesus says, we have the light. God has shown us what to do, so we'll be okay. So let's go. Verse 11, after he had said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up. See, to Jesus, the death of a believer is just like falling asleep. You just nod off, and then you wake up refreshed, and everything is good. It's just like falling asleep. His disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So his disciples just didn't get this. They had a lot of learning to do, and Jesus is about to teach them big time. So he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I'm glad I was not there so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Lazarus is dead, and I'm glad that he died because you guys need to learn something, and you're about to learn it. Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. Don't you love Thomas? I mean, Thomas is just black and white. He's absolutely black and white. If we go there, we're going to die. Okay, you want us to go? Okay, let's go and die. He's just like that. But that same black and whiteness, after Jesus risen from the dead and Thomas put his hands in his fingers, that same black and white took Thomas to take the gospel right across Asia and right to India and around India. So it wasn't all bad. Just took him a while to get there. First thing we see about Jesus' view of death is Jesus shows us existence doesn't end with death. Even though Lazarus' body is in the grave, existence doesn't end with death. So right away he puts himself at odds with our modern scientific worldview. Existence does not end with death. It does not end at death. Verse 17. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them on the loss of their brother. So, Bethany is about 25-30 k's away from where Jesus was, Bethabara. So Lazarus is about to die. He gets sick. He's about to die. Mary and Martha send a message to Jesus. It takes that messenger about a day to get there. And Lazarus has obviously died not long after they sent the message. So the messenger takes a day. Jesus waits for 2 days where he was at Bethabara. Then they decide to go back. Takes him another day to get back. So by the time he gets back, 4 days has passed. And the Jews, when someone died, they buried you quickly. Like the Egyptians would wait around, they'd embalm, they'd do a whole lot of processes. But the Jews would bury them very quickly, get them in the tomb and sealed up. So by the time Jesus gets back, Lazarus has already been dead for 4 days, been in the tomb for 4 days. And Bethany's not far away from Jerusalem, so a whole lot of mourners have come out from Jerusalem to Bethany, probably friends and relatives, and no doubt, according to the Jewish custom, a number of professional mourners would have gone out to the house of Mary and Martha as well. So they've got all the mourners in their house, and Lazarus has been in the tomb just outside of the town of Bethany. It's interesting because in Jewish thought at the time, there's a number of Jewish writings that say the spirit stays around the body for 3 days before it moves on. It's not a biblical idea, but it is a common Jewish idea. By 4 days, no one doubts this guy's dead. He's dead. 4 days, the spirit's gone, he's decisively dead. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. So Jesus comes, and he doesn't want to create a scene yet. So he just stays a little bit outside the village because he doesn't want to, the Jews are trying to kill him. And so he sends word in, Martha comes out and talks to him. And she says to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. She expresses the obvious distress that Jesus hadn't done what they expected. Jesus is their close friend and he hadn't came and he hadn't healed him. And she's distressed about that. See, we all have expectations, don't we, of what Jesus will do. And sometimes he doesn't meet those expectations. And I think in some ways maybe those are some of the hardest times, aren't they, in our discipleship journey, when Jesus doesn't do the thing we expected him to do. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes it's just because we haven't done our part. I mean, he asked us to pray. He asked us to pray with faith. He asked us to pray persistently. He asked us to pray with good motives. He asked us to pray with a good conscience. And sometimes we just haven't done our part. Sometimes it's because his love just goes further than we're comfortable with. We often ask for kind of current temporal blessings for our temporal needs, and it's good that we do. We're supposed to do that. We're supposed to bring all our needs to Jesus. But sometimes he has more in store for us. He wants to give us something deeper and better. And we kind of just maybe prefer the temporal, just give me the easy bit. But he's got something better. But frequently it's because of what happened in this situation. Frequently it's because he knows something that we don't know. See, he knew something that Mary and Martha didn't know. They didn't know what was going to happen. He did. And so Jesus knows things. He knows the future. He knows eternity. He knows stuff we don't know. And so sometimes he doesn't do the things we expect him to do because he's got something better based on what he knows. And I guess when he doesn't meet expectations, the thing we need to do is just rely on the things we do know. Just go back and stand on what you do know. Jesus gave his life for us on the cross. He died for us. We can never doubt his love. His love is beyond doubt. His commitment to us for all eternity is beyond doubt. So when he doesn't do what we expect him to do, we just need to rely on what we do know of what Jesus has done. And wait until we get an answer as to, why. So she says, if you'd been here, our brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. See, Martha's got a faith in Jesus, hasn't she? She's disappointed, but she's still got faith. I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. Martha's faith is that Jesus is really close to God. He's close to God. If Jesus asks something from God, God will do it. Jesus is about to take her faith way further than that. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection at the last day. So Jesus now brings up this idea of resurrection. And Martha's confused. Well, I know he's going to rise at the last day. I know the general resurrection he'll rise. Is that what you're talking about? Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? What a great couple of verses that is. I am the resurrection and the life. See, Jesus says, I have the power to raise Lazarus from the dead. Is that what he says? Like he's kind of, in a Marvel universe and his superpower is the ability to resurrect. Is that what he's saying? Some people have got spider webs they can shoot out and some can fly, but Jesus has the power of resurrection. That's not what he says. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. Those two words are loaded. I am. First of all, it's a reference back to the days of Moses, when Moses is at the burning bush and God sends him to speak to the Israelites, and he says, who should I say sent me? And God says, I am that I am. Tell them I am sent me. The divine name I am. God is the one who has existence in and of himself. He just exists. It's his fundamental characteristic. He is. He always was. He always will be. He can't not exist. See, we're contingent. We exist because he made us. If he didn't make us, we wouldn't exist. And if he stops keeping us in existence, we don't exist. But he just exists. He's the one who can truly say, I am. I just am. And Jesus is taking the divine name upon himself. He's claiming to be God right here. I am the resurrection, the life. And he goes further, he says, I'm not just someone who can resurrect, people. My being is the source of life. My being is the source of resurrection. I just am the one who gives life and who resurrects. That's who I am. That's my nature. If you are connected to me, you will have life. You will be raised because I am resurrection. I am life. It's my fundamental characteristic. It's who I am. And I think it's also pointing forward a little bit when Jesus himself will go to the cross. And on the cross, he'll die to pay the price for our sin. And then one day he will rise to new life. On the third day, he rose to new life. And in a sense, he is the one who rises from the dead. And if we are in him, we will rise with him. He is the resurrection. And if we connect ourselves to him, we too will rise. There's a number of I am sayings in John. We've been through a few of them. Jesus' very nature is that he is bread. If he is the one you can feed upon. He's the source of spiritual food. He's the source of light. He just is light. He is the door. He's the way into the kingdom. His being is the way into the kingdom. He is a shepherd. If you are in him, you will know, you will be guided and directed. His resurrection, he's the source of life. He's the way, the truth, and the life. He's the vine. If you're connected to him, you will bear fruit because that's who he is. It's not the things he's going to do, it's who he is. So if you come into connection with him, you will live. So Jesus shows that existence doesn't end at death. And he reveals that he is the source of life, the giver of life, even for those who've died. He is the giver of life, the source of life. Martha says, "Yes, Lord," she replies, "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God who is to come into the world." See, Martha's faith is growing here, isn't it? She started off, "I know you're close to God. If you ask God, he'll do it." Now he's saying, "You are the Messiah." Very similar to Peter's confession of the Christ, isn't it? You're the Christ. You're the Messiah. You're the one God sent. Verse 28, after she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house comforting her noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. See, Jesus is still managing the crowd. He's not quite ready yet to make a big scene. He's had a talk with Martha, and he wants to talk to Mary first. So he sends Martha back, and he says, "Just send Mary out." So Martha goes back, and she sidles up to Mary, and she whispers, "Jesus is here, go and have a chat." Well, Mary just jumps up so quickly and races out that everyone knows something's up and follow her out there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. She says the same thing as Martha. You weren't here, you didn't come. Martha, expressed that disappointment, and then she had this faith-filled conversation, and Martha grew in her understanding, grew in her faith. But I think maybe Mary's got a deeper faith to start with. She doesn't understand why Jesus didn't come, but she just falls at his feet. She acknowledges him. You are Lord. I don't know why you didn't come, but I know that you are Lord, and I know that you are the answer even in this situation. She just falls at his feet. When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, they replied. Jesus wept. See, when Jesus saw Mary's distress, he saw the people's distress, he's deeply moved. This word deeply moved in Greek is the word embramaomai, and it means to be very angry, to be indignant, move with indignation. It's often used of a horse like a stallion snorting and, kicking its legs out. He's angry at this. He's moved because death should not be. Death is not meant to be. The world wasn't created for death. Death is not natural. That's why we struggle when we're mourning, when we're grieving. We don't know how to mourn. Like, we have eyes to see, we have ears to hear, but we don't have a part of us that knows how to grieve or mourn because it wasn't meant to be. We weren't created to deal with death. And Jesus looks at it. He's angry at this situation. Death should not be. He's the resurrection and life. Death is kind of the opposite of his very being. Jesus shows that existence doesn't end at death. He's the source of life, the giver of life, even to those who die. And he is totally opposed to death. See, all the other worldviews are ways to come to terms with death, to come to grips with death. Jesus doesn't want to come to grips with death. He wants to destroy it. He hates death. Verse 36, then the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of a blind man have kept this man from dying? The Jews misinterpret Jesus' tears as his love for Lazarus and grief over, losing Lazarus. And then they hypocritically say, well, if he could open the eyes of the blind, why couldn't he have saved him? When he opened the eyes of the blind, they were saying, oh, this is not a miracle, this isn't true. Now it's, oh, well, yeah, it can do that, but he can't do this. They're so hard-hearted, aren't they? Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odour. He's been in there for 4 days. He tells them to take away the stone. Martha, you see Martha's faith journey, his discipleship journey is up and down and up and down. She sort of, she's got to, you are the Messiah. Then Jesus says, take away the stone. And he said, oh, don't do that, don't do that. He's been in there 4 days. I think our own faith journeys are a little bit like Martha's, aren't they? Up and down, up and down. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So Jesus speaks to Martha and he says, stay with me, Martha. Come on, faith, just believe, just keep believing, and he's coaching on. Come on, you'll see the glory of God. Just stay believing, stay with me, and he's drawing her along in faith. So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. It's kind of this slightly comical, discussion between Jesus and God. It's sort of like a staged discussion. They take away the stone. They've got at least enough faith to get the stone out of the way. And then Jesus looks up and prays to Father. The Father, he didn't need to pray to God. He didn't need it to do the miracle. He can do the miracle without talking to God, but he kind of says, God, I pray that you'll hear me. He says, I know you actually always hear me, but I just want them to hear me saying this, because he wants them to realize that he is the one sent by God. He's about to be out and open with the fact that he is the Messiah. And he says, I want him to understand what's going on here, So that's why I'm talking to you. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." So Jesus calls out in a loud voice. Once again, I don't think he needed a loud voice to do the miracle. He could have done that at a whisper. But he wants them to know what's going on. He wants them to know that he is the one sent by God. So he calls in a loud voice, "Lazarus." He uses his name. Some people say if he hadn't used his name, all of the other dead people would have come as well. I think one day we will all hear our name called by Jesus as he just calls us through that great divide. Or if we live till he comes, as he calls us to him, we'll hear our own name being called. And his command is very succinct. In Greek, the command is just here, outside. It's like, "Lazarus, out." It's just very succinct. It calls, and then to the amazement of all, the dead man laying on the thing, covered in the grave clothes, sits up and starts to walk out. He's wrapped in linen around his arms and his feet, is over his head, and almost like a mummy or something. He gets up and he walks out of the grave. And you can imagine the scene. There would have been people probably screaming. Mary and Martha would have probably broken into tears. The Jews are blown away as this dead man gets up and walks out of the tomb, and no one knows what to do. And almost sort of comically again, Jesus says, "Well, maybe just take the grave clothes off, get him a cup of tea." And people are blown away as this dead man is raised to life by the power of Jesus. See, Jesus shows that existence doesn't end at death. He's the giver of life even to those who die. He's totally opposed to death. And he has proved beyond a shadow of doubt that he is the power of death. He raised Jairus' daughter. He raised the widow's son. He raised Lazarus in front of the Jews, in front of them all. And ultimately, a couple of weeks after this, he'll prove it completely when he's put to death on the cross, taking the sin of the world upon himself. Died, put in the tomb. He's in the tomb for 3 days, and then after 3 days he rose and appeared to hundreds. The tomb empty, showing decisively that he has the power over death. He's not here to help us come to terms with death. He came to defeat it and to defeat the kingdom of death on the cross. And he decisively did that, and he showed that he did that. You'd like to think that the Jews then put their faith in Jesus and said, "We'll stop trying to kill him now. We'll just believe he's our Messiah." But this event became that final straw that led to the events that in a couple of weeks would be the events we celebrate at Easter, that we will be celebrating next week at Easter. They began to plot and scheme to put him to death. And 2 weeks after that, he was put to death on the cross. There are many different views in the world about death, but only Jesus showed decisively that he has the power. He has the power over death, the power to defeat death. Why wouldn't you follow him? Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we just bow before you. We just, like Mary, throw ourselves at your feet, because you are the one who defeated death, the ultimate enemy. You stared death in the face. You faced it, you went to death, you rose from the dead, showing decisively you've defeated it. And we thank you that if we come to you, if we believe in you, that you will give us life. Life in all of its fullness, and life for all eternity. You are the source of life. And we just come now in faith and in wonder, and we praise you through your name. Amen.